Hi guys! So today we're going to start the series on Sherlock Holmes. Yes! I don't know what I'm going to call it yet, because the Sherlock Holmes series, I don't know. I'll think of a title and you're going to see it. So I thought I'd start by making an introduction to Sherlock Holmes and to Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. So let's begin, shall we? But why did I want to do this? It's just that I find Doyle such an interesting character, and I want to just talk a little bit about his life. I don't know many details, and that you can just read a biography, as I did. But what I find it most interesting about him is his relationship to his own work, especially Sherlock Holmes. Because I feel like with the fandom, and because it has been around such a long time, and there are official societies, and some people have this idea, that the adaptations should be exactly like the books, that you can touch them, that the texts are sacred and all of that. And I think that's a subject for another video on adaptations, because it's what I've been studying for the past, let me see, so 2 years from the master's degree, another from, I think about 4 or 5 years now. I've been studying adaptations and involved with adaptation studies, so maybe that will come up in another video. But today let's focus on Sherlock Holmes. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was born in Edinburgh, Scotland, which is why I have my Loch Ness mug, because I don't own a Sherlock Holmes mug yet. How? I don't know. I'll have to solve that. So he was born on May 22nd of 1859, and ever since he was young, he showed interest in literature, in books, and in writing itself. So he started writing stories at a very young age, but he wasn't very good at school. He didn't excel at school, and there's this book with letters here, and in one of the letters, I think there's something of his teachers, something like that they didn't believe he would fare well in tests and in academics, but he ended up doing quite alright, and he started working on writing. Before Holmes, there was a couple of historical novels, if I'm not mistaken. Like, Doyle wrote a lot. Like, it's insane how much he wrote besides the Sherlock Holmes series is already insane in number, but what he wrote besides that is just insane. He was very prolific, but his other works, of course, are much of a success, or at least as much as Sherlock Holmes is. And the funniest thing about it for me, I don't know if funniest, but curious thing, is that he hated Sherlock Holmes. Yes, so I'm going back to that. So he started writing, he started looking into publishing, but the thing is, Doyle was a fan of detective stories. He enjoyed Edgar Allan Poe's works and other authors before him. But the thing about it is that he was a little bit angry about detective works. Why was he angry, or at least dissatisfied? Is that he always thought it was absurd how the detectives in the stories came to the conclusions just like out of thin air, out of nowhere, like magic. And he wasn't about that life. He wanted to read, I think that's why he liked Poe so much, because Poe was the precursor of the intellectual detective. So there was Poe with Auguste Dupin. So the big detectives of the story, like the big intellectual detectives that we have. So we have Poe, and then we have Sherlock Holmes as the two great intellectual detectives, the two precursors of the genre. And then of course, there were detectives before them and there are after them. But before Poe, the detectives are of the sort that Doyle didn't like very much. So of course, inspired by Poe, he decided, you know what? I'm not satisfied with these detective stories. I'm gonna write one myself. So he did. So he wrote A Study in Scarlet. It was first called Tangled Skein, and he published it as A Study in Scarlet. Let me put it here. For the first time in 1887 in Beatles Christmas Annual, which was a magazine. So he published it there. And in the beginning, it wasn't that much of a success. Well, people read it and enjoyed it, but it was some years later with A Scandal in Bohemia, well, not only, but A Scandal in Bohemia helped people go crazy over Sherlock Holmes. Why? Because people liked gossip. And I'm going to talk about The Scandal in Bohemia in another video. Well, I'm going to talk about other works. So with The Scandal in Bohemia, people kept trying to imagine who the royal people were in the story. Like, they were trying to relate it to real life. So that was just, you know, for them. Oh my god, there's a scandal with royals. And he wrote about it. So he became very famous for that. But people were demanding more stories. And of course, he was making money out of it. And his letters are just so good because he was not accepting less money than he thought he deserved for the stories. He was always not fighting, but arguing with the publishers because he wanted to earn more for his stories. He always thought they were worth much more than they were trying to pay for. So that was fun. But writing Sherlock Holmes that much was keeping him from writing and focusing on his other interests, which were historical novels. And so he decided to kill Sherlock Holmes. For the first time, his mother, in a letter, intervened. She told him not to kill Sherlock Holmes, please, and he listened to her. The other time, however, he didn't. So in the final problem, he killed Holmes. So that was a scandal. It is said that people actually mourned in the streets. They were black, and they were like black bands around their arms to sign they were in mourning for Sherlock Holmes. He hated writing Sherlock Holmes. He couldn't stand writing Holmes anymore because it was stopping him from writing his other stuff. So he stopped for a while. He went to war, and when he came back, of course, in this time, people demanded more stories. They wrote to publishers, they wrote to him, and all of that. So after a while, in 1903, after coming back from the war, he wrote what is his favorite novel and one of the most famous of the whole of the Sherlock Holmes stories, and certainly I think it is one of the most adapted ones. And that is, let me get here, that is The Hound of the Baskervilles. This story is not set after Sherlock's death. It's set previously because, well, he died, so he thought he'd write more of Holmes's former life. But people weren't having any of that. No. They wanted him to actually resurrect Sherlock Holmes, to have more stories after his period of death. So he succumbed to peer pressure because, of course, if he wrote those stories, he would get a lot of money because people were really interested in reading them. So he set to do that, while also writing and working on other stuff. So he published the first story in 1887, and the last one was published in 1927. So, because he lived more than that, and cinema, film was invented in the end of the 19th century, he was alive for the first adaptations. He was. And there's one that is his favorite. I can't remember which one now because there are a lot. So, one interesting fact is that Sherlock Holmes is the most adapted human character in the history of cinema, according to the Guinness World Records. Yes, he is. Not Watson though, because Watson wasn't in a few, if not a lot, of the first decades of adaptations because they didn't think he was that worthy of a character. He's just a narrator, he doesn't have any importance besides narrating the story, so we're not going to put him there. But one of the most interesting things that I find about Doyle's relation to adaptations is that the first adaptation is a play, was wrote by William Gillette. I don't know how you pronounce that, but let's go with it. and the play was staged for the first time in 1899. And, you know, Doyle tried writing a play, but he couldn't. So he agreed that he'd let this American actor write his own play. And he said, and I quote, not perfectly, but I'm going to write the quote here, that he could marry the detective or murder him or do anything he pleased with him, for he would rather leave the detective, you know, the stage detective, in the hands of someone who knew about the stage, someone who knew what would work better on the stage. So we have that. Doyle himself said, you know, that people, that adapters, that, well, the first adapter and maybe future adapters could know better what would work on the stage, or in our case now, on the screen. Well, he's a little bit contradictory because he sometimes criticizes adaptations and all of that, but you know, I think every author who has his work adapted does that at some point. But the author himself was very open about it. I think it's great that he had this vision very early on, even before film, you know, even before Sherlock Holmes being adapted to film. So there's that. And the other interesting fact about adaptations is that not only the stage and the audiovisual adapt Doyle's works, he also appropriates stuff from them, such as Billy the page boy. He appears in a couple of short stories, but Billy isn't his original character. No, he saw Billy for the first time in the play. Billy is actually a character created by William Gillette to substitute Watson. So Doyle liked Billy very much, and he decided to include him in his short stories. So I think it's wonderful that he did that, you know. I think it's very forward thinking of him, you know, to know, okay, you're adapting my works, so I like this character. I like your characters, Mr. Adapter. So you know what? I'm going to borrow him for my short stories. I think that's awesome. I think that's great. Which is why I said it, for me, it doesn't really make much sense that some people are very against some Sherlock Holmes adaptations and appropriations and reworkings, or whatever you want to call them, you know? Because of that, Doyle was very open as much as he could be at the time about these things himself. So I think that's what I wanted to talk about him. It ended up not being a very, very short video, but I think that's it. I hope you enjoyed it. I think, as you can see, I'm very passionate about the subject, and I hope you'll enjoy the future Sherlock Holmes videos that I'll make. Okay, see you next time. Bye bye!